Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're exploring what if Issei was saved by Ophis instead of Rias. This concept is absolutely broken because we're talking about the infinite dragon god personally investing in the red dragon emperor. Ophis can rewrite reality, casually erases other dragon gods, and has literally infinite power. Now imagine all that focused on enhancing one human, not through devil reincarnation, but direct power sharing from the most overpowered being in existence. So we thought, what if this cosmic-level entity falls in love with a human? This story follows Issei getting enhanced by infinite power, becoming the center of supernatural politics, and teaching a dragon god how to love. Reality-bending romance that literally reshapes the multiverse. Smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell. Let's dive into this masterpiece. The fountain in the center of the park sparkled under the warm afternoon sun as Issei Hyodu walked beside the most beautiful girl who had ever spoken to him. Yuma Amano, with her long black hair cascading down her back and her purple eyes that seemed to hold secrets, had actually agreed to go on a date with him. After years of rejection, mockery, and being branded as one of Kyoto Academy's most notorious perverts, this felt like a miracle. "Thank you for today, Issei-kun," Yuma said softly, her voice carrying that sweet tone that made his heart skip. "I had such a wonderful time." "Oh, really?" Issei stammered, still unable to believe this wasn't some elaborate dream. "I mean, I'm glad. I was worried I might be boring or not at all." She stepped closer and he caught a hint of her perfume, something floral that made his head spin. "You're exactly what I was looking for." They had spent the entire day together, visiting shops, sharing lunch at a small cafe, and talking about everything and nothing. Well, mostly Issei had rambled nervously while Yuma listened with that mysterious smile of hers. But she seemed genuinely interested, asking questions about his hobbies, his dreams, his life at school. No girl had ever paid him this kind of attention before. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they found themselves at the fountain where their date had begun. The park was nearly empty now, just a few joggers in the distance and the gentle sound of water cascading over stone. "Issei-kun," Yuma said, turning to face him fully. The dying light caught in her eyes, and for just a moment they seemed to glow with an otherworldly intensity. "There's something I need to tell you." His heart hammered against his ribs. Was she going to confess? Was this actually happening to him? "What is it, Yuma-chan?" She smiled, but something about it seemed different now, sharper, more predatory. "Will you do something for me? Anything." The word escaped before he could think about it, driven by teenage hormones and desperate hope. "Will you die for me?" The question hit him like a physical blow. What? The air around them began to shimmer, and Yuma's appearance started to shift. Her school uniform dissolved into black leather that hugged her curves in ways that would have driven him wild under different circumstances. Massive black wings erupted from her back, casting dark shadows across the ground. Her sweet expression twisted into something cruel and predatory. "You served your purpose," she said, her voice now carrying an otherworldly echo. "Drawing out the power sleeping within you was all I needed. The Red Dragon Emperor, such a waste, really, all that potential in such a pathetic vessel." Terror flooded through Issei's body as his mind struggled to process what was happening. This was impossible. Angels and demons were just stories, weren't they? But the evidence was right in front of him. The woman he thought he might be falling in love with was something inhuman, something that wanted him dead. "Please," he whispered, taking a stumbling step backward. "I don't understand what you're talking about. What's the Red Dragon Emperor? What power?" "You don't need to understand," the creature that had been Yuma said with mock sympathy. "You just need to die." Light began to coalesce in her outstretched palm, forming into a spear of pure radiance that hummed with lethal energy. The sight of it made every instinct in Issei's body scream at him to run, but his legs felt like lead. "Don't worry," she continued with false sweetness. "It will be quick, and your death will serve a greater purpose, eliminating a potential threat before it can fully awaken." The light spear pulsed, growing brighter and more solid. Issei wanted to run, wanted to scream, wanted to do anything except stand there like a deer in headlights. But his body wouldn't obey him. This was it. He was going to die here, alone in a park, killed by someone he thought cared about him. "Goodbye, Issei Hyodu." The spear left her hand like a bolt of lightning, too fast for his eyes to track. Pain exploded through his chest as the weapon pierced straight through his heart. He looked down in shock at the hole in his uniform, at the blood spreading across the white fabric. His legs gave out and he collapsed to his knees, then fell forward onto the cold concrete. Darkness crept in from the edges of his vision, so this was how it ended. No grand adventures, no saving the world, no harem of beautiful girls who actually wanted to be with him. Just death at 17, killed by his first girlfriend in a park where no one would find him until morning. I don't want to die, he thought desperately as his consciousness began to fade. I haven't done anything yet, I haven't lived. The last thing he expected to see was reality itself tearing open like fabric. The air above him simply split, not like a door opening or glass breaking, but as if existence itself had been cut by an impossibly sharp blade. Through the rift, he glimpsed something that his dying mind couldn't quite comprehend, a vast darkness filled with swirling galaxies and dimensions folding in on themselves. The creature that had been Yuuma stumbled backward, her confident expression replaced by pure terror. No, that's impossible. She wouldn't. A figure stepped through the dimensional tier with casual grace, and Issei's failing vision caught glimpses of otherworldly beauty. Small and seemingly delicate, with long black hair that seemed to absorb light and dark eyes that held the depth of eternity. She looked like a young girl, maybe his age, but the moment she appeared, the very air grew heavy with power that made his bones ache. The fallen angel, for that's what she had to be, fell to her knees, wings folding against her back in submission. "Oh, Ophis-sama, I didn't know. I would never have interfered if I had known this human was under your protection, Ophis." Even dying, Issei somehow recognized that name, though he couldn't remember from where. The girl, Ophis, ignored the groveling creature entirely, her attention focused solely on Issei's broken body. "Interesting," she said, her voice carrying an otherworldly echo that seemed to resonate in dimensions his mind couldn't perceive. "The Welsh dragon stirs within this human." She knelt beside him with fluid grace, her dark eyes studying his face with clinical curiosity. Up close, her beauty was almost painful to look at, perfect features unmarked by time or emotion, skin that seemed to glow with its own inner light. But it was her eyes that held him transfixed. They were ancient, older than civilizations, yet held a spark of genuine interest as she examined him. "Please," the fallen angel whimpered behind her, "I was only following orders." The Grigori wanted the sacred gear eliminated before, the creature's words cut off abruptly. Issei couldn't see what happened, but when Ophis glanced back, the fallen angel was simply gone. Not destroyed or banished, erased, as if she had never existed at all. "Annoying," Ophis murmured, then turned her attention back to him. She placed her small hand against his chest, directly over the wound that was stealing his life. The moment her skin touched his, power beyond comprehension flooded through him. It wasn't hot or cold, painful or pleasant, it simply was as fundamental and overwhelming as gravity or time itself. The hole in his chest began to seal, flesh and bone knitting back together with impossible speed. But it wasn't just healing. He could feel every cell in his body changing, becoming something more than human. His senses expanded exponentially, allowing him to perceive colors that had no names and hear frequencies beyond normal human range. Strength flowed through his limbs, not just physical power, but something deeper, more fundamental. "What?" he gasped as consciousness returned in full, his voice stronger than it had ever been. "What are you doing to me?" "Improving you," Ophis replied matter-of-factly, her hand still pressed against his chest. "Your potential was impressive, but your vessel was inadequate. I am correcting this deficiency." The power flowing into him was intoxicating, like drinking starlight or breathing in the essence of creation itself. He could feel something awakening deep within his soul, something that had been sleeping until this moment. A presence vast and ancient stirred in the depths of his being. "Partner, what is this power? This is not devil magic or angelic blessing." The voice in his head was new but somehow familiar, carrying the weight of eons and the heat of dragon fire. Issei's eyes widened as he realized what it meant. His sacred gear was awakening, but it felt different somehow, enhanced by whatever Ophis was doing to him. "The boosted gear," Ophis observed, noticing the red gauntlet that had materialized on his left arm. One of the 13 Longinus, impressive, though hardly surprising given the circumstances. She lifted her hand from his chest and he immediately missed the contact. The wound was completely healed, not even a scar remaining, but he could feel the changes she had wrought throughout his entire being. His reflection in a nearby puddle showed eyes that now held flecks of silver among the brown, and his presence seemed to carry a subtle weight that hadn't been there before. "Why?" he asked, struggling to sit up. His body moved with a grace and strength that felt alien yet natural. "Why did you save me?" Ophis studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "You interest me," she said finally. "The combination of your sacred gear, your potential, and your unique nature presents possibilities I wish to explore." "Unique nature?" Issei echoed, confusion evident in his voice. "I'm just a regular high school student. Well, I was until..." He gestured vaguely at where the fallen angel had been standing. "No," Ophis corrected, rising to her feet with fluid grace. "You are no longer merely human, nor will you ever be again. The power I have shared with you has changed your fundamental nature. You are something new now." She paused, tilting her head as if listening to something he couldn't hear. "There will be others who seek to claim you now. Devils, angels, other fallen angels. They will sense what you have become and attempt to recruit or eliminate you. This does not concern me, but it may prove educational for you." "Educational?" Issei scrambled to his feet, amazed at how effortless the movement felt. "What am I supposed to do? I don't know anything about this supernatural world or how to use whatever you've done to me." For the first time, something that might have been amusement flickered across Ophis's features. "You will learn. Survival is an excellent teacher." She turned to leave, the dimensional rift behind her beginning to widen again. Panic seized Issei as he realized she was abandoning him in this new reality she had thrust him into. "Wait," he called out, reaching toward her instinctively. "You can't just leave me like this. I don't understand what's happening or what I'm supposed to do." Ophis paused at the threshold of the rift, looking back over her shoulder. For just a moment, her ancient eyes seemed to soften slightly, though her expression remained neutral. "You belong to me now," she said simply, her words carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "That protection comes with expectations. Do not disappoint me." With that, she stepped through the dimensional tier, which sealed itself behind her as if it had never existed. Issei was left alone in the park, standing where minutes ago he had been dying, his mind reeling from everything that had just occurred. The park was silent except for the gentle splash of the fountain, but everything felt different now. His enhanced senses picked up traces of supernatural energy lingering in the air, and he could hear conversations from blocks away if he concentrated. The weight of the boosted gear on his arm was comforting and terrifying in equal measure. "Partner," the voice in his head spoke again, and now he could sense the massive presence behind it, ancient, powerful, and definitely draconic. "That was no ordinary being who saved us. The power she wielded, I have not felt its like in centuries." "You know what she was?" Issei asked aloud, then felt foolish for talking to himself in an empty park. "I have suspicions, but they seem impossible. Tell me, did she give you a name?" "Ophis," Issei replied, and he felt the dragon presence in his mind recoil in shock. "The infinite dragon god," the voice whispered with something approaching reverence. "Partner, do you understand what has just occurred? You have been personally intervened upon by one of the most powerful beings in existence. She could destroy entire pantheons with a thought, yet she chose to save a human teenager. The question is why?" Issei looked down at his hands, marveling at the power he could feel thrumming just beneath his skin. Whatever Ophis had done to him, he was no longer the weak, perverted loser who got rejected by every girl he asked out. But with that power came questions, responsibilities, and dangers he couldn't even imagine. "You belong to me now," he murmured, repeating her words. They sent an odd thrill through him that he didn't want to examine too closely. The most powerful being he could imagine had claimed ownership of him, and instead of feeling trapped, he felt chosen. As he walked home through the darkening streets, Issei found his mind racing with possibilities and fears in equal measure. His life as he knew it was over. Ophis had made that clear, but what was beginning in its place? What did it mean to belong to the infinite dragon god, and why did the thought of seeing her again make his newly enhanced heart race? "This is only the beginning, partner," Drake's voice echoed in his mind as he reached his house. "Whatever game the infinite dragon god is playing, we are now pieces on her board. I suggest you become stronger quickly. I suspect we will need every advantage we can gain." Issei paused at his front door, key in hand, and looked back toward the park where his old life had ended. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, and new possibilities he couldn't even imagine. But for the first time in his 17 years of life, he felt like he might actually be capable of handling them. After all, he belonged to Ophis now, and somehow that thought filled him with more confidence than terror. The infinite dragon god had chosen him, and he was determined not to disappoint her. Issei's alarm clock never stood a chance. The shrill beeping that had tormented him every morning for years met its end with a satisfying crunch as his hand instinctively reached out to silence it. Where once there had been a cheap digital clock, now there were only scattered plastic fragments and a small crater in his nightstand. "Shit," he muttered, staring at the destruction his enhanced strength had caused. 3 days had passed since his encounter with Ophis, and he was still adjusting to the dramatic changes in his body. Simple tasks like opening doors, picking up his backpack, or apparently hitting the snooze button had become exercises in restraint. "Your control is improving, partner," DxD observed from within his soul. "Yesterday you accidentally crushed 3 doorknobs. That's not exactly encouraging," Issei replied under his breath, carefully extracting clock fragments from the splintered wood. His parents had already started asking questions about the various accidents around the house: broken dishes, a cracked bathroom mirror, impressions in the walls where he'd leaned too hard. He was running out of plausible explanations. Getting dressed required the same careful attention he'd been practicing all week. His school uniform felt different now, the fabric seeming somehow inadequate against his enhanced skin. When he looked in the mirror, the changes were subtle but unmistakable. His shoulders were broader, his posture more confident, and those silver flecks in his eyes seemed to catch the light in ways that definitely weren't normal. The walk to Kyo Academy provided a welcome distraction from his domestic destruction. His enhanced senses picked up details he'd never noticed before: conversations from inside houses as he passed, the distinct sense of different families' breakfast routines, even the faint supernatural traces that seemed to cling to certain areas of the town. "You're beginning to perceive the hidden world," DxD explained as Issei paused near a street corner that seemed to shimmer with residual energy. "This town has more supernatural activity than most. Devils, angels, various other entities, they all leave traces for those with the senses to detect them." "Devils," Issei's step faltered slightly. "Like actual demons?" "Not quite. Modern devils are more civilized than their ancient predecessors. Many attend human schools, run businesses, integrate into society. You'll likely encounter some soon enough." As if summoned by DxD's words, Issei's enhanced hearing picked up a familiar voice from the school courtyard ahead. Rias Gremory, the crimson-haired beauty who was the subject of countless fantasies among Kyo's male population, was speaking in hushed tones with her black-haired friend Akino Himejima. "The energy readings from 3 nights ago are still bothering me," Rias was saying, her usually cheerful voice carrying notes of concern. "Whatever happened in that park released more power than anything we've recorded in this area." "Could it have been an angel?" Akino asked, her melodious voice tinged with curiosity. "The residual traces suggest something far more significant. The energy signature was," Rias paused, seeming to search for words, "infinite, as if someone had torn a hole in reality itself." Issei's enhanced hearing allowed him to catch every word despite being nearly 50 yards away. He forced himself to keep walking normally, though his heart rate spiked as he realized they were discussing his encounter with Ophis. "Interesting," DxD mused. "The Devil Princess has sensitive instruments. Most supernatural beings wouldn't have been able to detect traces from the infinite dragon god after 3 days." "Devil Princess?" Issei whispered, ducking his head as he passed near the 2 girls. "Rias Gremory, heir to one of the most powerful devil families, and her companion is no ordinary human either. This school appears to be a supernatural nexus, partner. You should be cautious." But caution became impossible the moment Rias' eyes met his across the courtyard. The impact was immediate and electric, not just the normal teenage boy reaction to an incredibly beautiful girl, but something deeper. Her blue-green eyes widened slightly and he saw recognition flash across her features. Not recognition of him personally, but of what he now carried. "Excuse me," she said to Akino, never breaking eye contact with Issei. "I'll catch up with you later." Panic surged through Issei's chest as the crimson-haired beauty began walking directly toward him. This was exactly what Ophis had warned him about. Other supernatural beings would sense what he'd become. He considered running, but his legs felt rooted to the spot as she approached. "Good morning," Rias said pleasantly, though her eyes held a calculating intelligence that made Issei's skin prickle. "You're Issei Hyodu, correct?" "Second year, class 2B. "Why yes," he managed, acutely aware that several other students were watching their interaction with poorly concealed interest. The idea of Rias Gremory voluntarily talking to him would fuel gossip for weeks. "I'm Rias Gremory, student council president," she continued, extending her hand in greeting. I don't believe we've been formally introduced. When their hands touched, Issei felt a jolt of energy pass between them. Rias' eyes sharpened immediately, her supernatural senses no doubt detecting the power flowing through his enhanced physiology. Fascinating, she murmured, her grip lingering just a moment too long. Tell me, Issei-kun, have you been feeling different lately, perhaps experiencing unusual dreams or sensations? Don't reveal anything, DxD advised urgently. Devils are skilled at manipulation and recruitment. She's fishing for information. What do you mean? Issei asked, trying to project confusion despite his racing heart. Rias studied his face carefully, clearly not fooled by his amateur acting. Nothing serious. Just that sometimes students experience stress from academic pressure and we like to check in. Perhaps you'd like to visit the Occult Research Club sometime. We meet in the old school building after classes. The Occult Research Club, we study supernatural phenomena, local legends, that sort of thing. Her smile was warm, but her eyes remained sharp. I think you might find it educational. Before Issei could formulate a response, the school bell rang, providing a convenient escape route. I should get to class, he said, gently extracting his hand from hers. Of course. But Issei-kun, she waited until he met her eyes again. My offer remains open. I have a feeling we'll be seeing more of each other soon. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of barely suppressed anxiety. Issei found it nearly impossible to concentrate on his classes, hyper-aware of every supernatural trace his enhanced senses detected throughout the school. By lunchtime, he'd identified at least 3 other students who carried otherworldly energy signatures. A petite girl with white hair who moved with predatory grace, a cheerful boy whose smile seemed to hide something dangerous, and several others whose true natures remained frustratingly unclear. You're learning to see through the masquerade, DxD observed as Issei sat alone on the school roof, trying to process everything he'd discovered. Most humans go their entire lives without realizing they're surrounded by supernatural beings. This is insane, Issei muttered, staring out over the campus that he was beginning to realize was far more complicated than he'd ever imagined. 3 days ago, I was just a regular pervert getting shot down by girls. Now apparently I'm some kind of supernatural magnet living in a town full of devils and angels. The power Ophis granted you comes with a price, partner. You can never return to ignorance. The question is, what will you do with this knowledge? Before Issei could answer, his enhanced hearing picked up the sound of footsteps on the roof access stairs. He turned to see a small figure emerging onto the rooftop, the white-haired girl he'd noticed earlier. Up close, she was even more striking, with golden eyes that seemed far too ancient for her youthful appearance. You're the one, she said simply, her voice carrying a slight accent he couldn't place. The one who's been affecting the local energy patterns. I don't know what you're talking about, Issei replied automatically, though he made no move to leave. Something about this girl's presence was oddly comforting rather than threatening. She tilted her head, studying him with feline curiosity. Kaniko Taoju, she said by way of introduction, and you smell like dragon and something else. Something infinite? A Nekomata, DxD identified immediately. A devil, but originally a cat spirit. Her supernatural senses are particularly acute. Dragon? Issei asked, deciding that playing completely ignorant was no longer viable. Boosted gear, Kaniko stated matter-of-factly. One of the 13 Longinus sacred gears, but there's something else mixed in, something that doesn't belong in any normal human. Her eyes narrowed slightly. What happened to you? The directness of her question caught him off guard. Unlike Ria's subtle probing, Kaniko seemed genuinely curious rather than manipulative. I'm not sure I should. Butchu wants to recruit you, Kaniko interrupted. She thinks you're just an awakened sacred gear user who needs guidance. But that's not what you are, is it? Before Issei could respond, the air around them suddenly grew heavy with an all-too-familiar pressure. Reality shimmered and his heart leaped as a dimensional rift opened just behind Kaniko. The small Nekomata's eyes went wide with terror as she spun around to face the tier in space. Ophis stepped through the rift with her characteristic grace, her dark eyes immediately locking onto Issei's face. She looked exactly as she had 3 nights ago, timeless, beautiful, and utterly otherworldly. But seeing her again sent an unexpected surge of relief and something warmer through his chest. You're adapting well, she observed, apparently unconcerned by Kaniko's presence. Though you still lack proper control. O Ophis-sama, Kaniko whispered, dropping into a deep bow that spoke of ingrained supernatural protocol. I didn't realize this human was under your protection. Protection is insufficient terminology, Ophis replied, never taking her eyes off Issei. He belongs to me. The casual possessiveness in her tone sent an odd thrill through Issei's enhanced physiology, though he wasn't sure if he should be flattered or concerned. Kaniko, meanwhile, looked like she was trying very hard not to faint. "Why are you here?" Issei asked, finding his voice despite the powerful presence of the infinite dragon god. "To continue your education," Ophis said simply. "Your encounter with the devil princess was inevitable, but your response was inadequate. If you are to serve my purposes, you require proper training. Training tonight." The abandoned warehouse district on the east side of town. She paused, tilting her head slightly. "And control your strength better. Destroying alarm clocks is inefficient." With that understated reprimand, she stepped back through the dimensional rift, which sealed itself immediately. The oppressive weight of her presence faded, leaving Issei and Kaniko alone on the rooftop in stunned silence. "The infinite dragon god," Kaniko whispered after a long moment. "She spoke to you like..." She shook her head, seeming unable to complete the thought. "Like what?" "Like you mattered to her personally." Kaniko's golden eyes met his, now filled with a mixture of awe and concern. "Issei-kun, do you understand what kind of being just claimed ownership of you? One of the most powerful entities in existence," DxD supplied helpfully. "And apparently she has plans for us that go beyond simple power enhancement." Issei looked out over the school campus, watching students go about their normal human lives while supernatural beings moved among them undetected. 3 days ago, he would have traded anything to be special, to be chosen by someone important, to matter in some cosmic sense. Now that it had actually happened, he was beginning to understand that getting what you wished for wasn't always a blessing. "Kaniko-chan," he said finally, using the familiar honorific without thinking, "what do you know about the warehouse district?" She studied his face for a long moment before answering. "It's where supernatural beings go when they want to avoid collateral damage," she said quietly. "Butchu uses it sometimes for training exercises that would be too dangerous for populated areas. Training exercises, combat training. Power development, the kind of education that usually results in significant property damage." She paused, concern evident in her features. "What exactly did she save you from 3 nights ago?" Issei's hand unconsciously moved to his chest where Raynare's light spear had pierced his heart. The memory was still painfully vivid, even enhanced as he now was. "Death," he said simply. "She saved me from death." Kaniko nodded slowly as if that explained everything. "Then whatever she has planned for you tonight, she considers it worth the investment. Just..." She hesitated, then continued in a softer voice. "Be careful, Issei-kun. Power like hers always comes with a price." As the lunch bell rang and students began filtering back into the building, Issei remained on the rooftop, staring at the spot where Ophis had appeared. Tonight would bring answers to some of his questions, but he suspected it would also raise entirely new ones. "Are you ready for this, partner?" DxD asked as they finally headed back to class. Issei thought about the casual way Ophis had claimed ownership of him, the warmth that had surged through him at seeing her again, and the dangerous promise in her words about continuing his education. "I don't think anyone could be ready for whatever she has planned," he admitted, "but I'm going anyway." "Then may whatever gods are watching over us have mercy on our souls," DxD muttered. "Because something tells me the infinite dragon god is not known for hers." As Issei settled into his afternoon classes, trying to appear normal while supernatural energy thrummed through his veins, one thought kept echoing in his mind. Tonight, his real education would begin, and somehow, despite all the danger and uncertainty, he found himself looking forward to it. The abandoned warehouse district felt different at night. What had seemed merely empty during the day now thrummed with an otherworldly energy that made Issei's enhanced senses tingle. Shadows seemed deeper here, streetlights flickered with unnatural patterns, and the very air felt charged with potential. Issei stood at the entrance to the largest warehouse, checking his phone for the 3rd time. 11:47 p.m. Ophis had said midnight, and somehow he knew she would be precisely punctual. The thought of seeing her again sent an unexpected flutter through his chest, part anticipation, part nervousness, and something else he didn't want to examine too closely. "This place reeks of supernatural activity," DxD observed, his voice carrying notes of unease. "Multiple factions have used this area: devils, angels, fallen angels, and something else. Something that predates them all. Dragons," Issei guessed, though he kept his voice low despite the apparent emptiness around him. "Among others, be cautious, partner. Neutral ground often becomes contested ground when powerful beings are involved." The warehouse doors groaned as Issei pushed them open, the sound echoing through the cavernous space within. Industrial fixtures hung from the ceiling like metal bones, casting strange shadows in the pale moonlight that filtered through grimy windows. The concrete floor showed scorch marks, impact craters, and other evidence of supernatural conflicts. "You're early," Issei spun around, his heart jumping despite his enhanced reflexes. Ophis stood perhaps 10 feet away, having appeared with the silent grace that seemed to define her. In the dim warehouse lighting, she looked even more ethereal than before. Her black hair seemed to absorb the shadows while her dark eyes reflected light like a cat's. "I wanted to make sure I found the right place," he said, suddenly feeling foolish for his nervousness. This was the being who had casually erased a fallen angel from existence, yet something about her presence made him want to impress her. "Punctuality suggests respect for one's time," Ophis replied, stepping closer with fluid movements. "An admirable quality." She wore the same simple black dress as before, but up close Issei could see that it seemed to shift and flow like liquid shadow. Her pale skin seemed to glow with its own inner light, and when she moved, reality itself seemed to bend slightly around her. "You said something about training," Issei began, then stopped as Ophis raised one small hand. "Before we proceed, there is a complication that requires addressing." Her head tilted slightly, dark eyes focusing on something beyond the warehouse walls. "We are not alone." "What do you?" The warehouse doors exploded inward with a thunderous crash, sending twisted metal flying across the concrete floor. Through the smoke and debris, a figure materialized with dramatic flair, crimson hair billowing, magic circle glowing beneath her feet, and an expression of determined authority on her beautiful features. Rias' Gremory had arrived, and she looked ready for war. "Ophis," she said, her voice carrying the authority of nobility despite her youth, "I demand to know what you're doing in my territory." "Oh, this is not good," DxD muttered. "Partner, you're about to be caught between two incredibly powerful supernatural beings with competing interests." Ophis didn't even glance at the dramatic entrance, her attention remaining fixed on Issei as if nothing had happened. "The Devil Princess lacks subtlety," she observed mildly, "and manners." "My territory, my rules," Rias replied, stepping through the destroyed doorway with her peerage flanking her. Akino Heimjima moved with deadly grace, electricity crackling around her fingers. Kaniko Tauju's golden eyes were wide with barely controlled fear, though she maintained her position. A blonde boy Issei didn't recognize gripped a sword that glowed with holy light. "Issei-kun," Rias continued, her blue-green eyes shifting to him, "step away from her. I don't know what she's promised you, but whatever it is, I can offer you better protection." "Protection?" Ophis's voice carried the barest hint of amusement. "From what precisely?" "From being manipulated by ancient powers that see humans as disposable tools," Rias shot back, magic beginning to gather around her hands. "I know what you are, infinite dragon god. Your interest in humans has never been benevolent." For the first time since her arrival, Ophis turned her full attention to Rias, and the temperature in the warehouse dropped noticeably. "You presume to lecture me about my intentions, child?" "I presume to protect someone under my jurisdiction from exploitation," Rias replied, though Issei noticed a slight tremor in her voice. "Issei-kun is a sacred gear user, which makes him mine." The single word hit the warehouse like a physical force. Windows cracked, metal fixtures groaned, and everyone except Ophis staggered slightly under the weight of absolute authority behind that simple declaration. "He belongs to me," Ophis continued, her voice never rising above conversational level despite the power it carried. "Your territorial claims are irrelevant. No one belongs to anyone." Issei finally found his voice, stepping between the two supernatural powerhouses despite every instinct screaming at him to run. "I'm not some prize to be won or territory to be claimed." Both Ophis and Rias turned to look at him with expressions of surprise, though for very different reasons. "Issei-kun," Rias said gently, her tone shifting to something more coaxing. "You don't understand the supernatural world yet. There are rules, hierarchies, protections that humans require to survive contact with their betters," Ophis interrupted, and there was definitely amusement in her voice now. "How condescending! I'm trying to help him." Rias' composure finally cracked, power flaring around her in crimson waves. "Whatever game you're playing, leave him out of it." "Game?" Ophis tilted her head, and for the first time since Issei had met her, she seemed genuinely curious about another person's perspective. "You believe this is entertainment for me, isn't it?" Rias challenged. You've never shown interest in individual humans before. Why this one? What makes Issei special enough to warrant the personal attention of a dragon god? Issei found himself holding his breath, genuinely curious about the answer to that question himself. Why had Ophis saved him? What did she see in a perverted high school student that warranted such dramatic intervention? Ophis was quiet for a long moment, her dark eyes shifting between Rias and Issei as if weighing her words carefully. When she finally spoke, her tone carried notes of something almost like vulnerability. "He interests me," she said simply. "The combination of potential and humanity, power and fragility. Most beings I encounter are either too weak to matter or too strong to surprise me. He is different." Different how? Rias pressed, though her aggressive posture had relaxed slightly. "He chose to live." Ophis's gaze settled on Issei's face. When faced with death, most humans panic or despair. He chose defiance. Even dying, even powerless, he refused to accept that his story was over. Issei felt heat rise in his cheeks at the unexpected praise. I didn't want to die without having really lived." Precisely. Something that might have been approval flickered across Ophis's features. That determination, that refusal to accept limitation, it is rare. Worth investment. The word hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that made Issei's enhanced heart race. Investment suggested long-term planning, personal interest, maybe even, "That doesn't give you the right to own him," Rias interjected, though her tone had lost most of its heat. "He's still human, still deserves to make his own choices." "I agree," Ophis said, surprising everyone present, "which is why I am here to train him rather than simply granting him power directly." "Train him for what?" "To survive what is coming." Ophis's expression grew serious, and the casual power she radiated seemed to intensify. "The supernatural world is changing. Old balances are shifting, ancient enemies are stirring, and new threats are emerging. He will need strength to navigate what lies ahead." "She's not wrong," DxD observed grimly. "I can sense it too. Something is building in the supernatural world. Old powers awakening, new alliances forming. The peace between factions is more fragile than most realize." "What kind of threats?" Issei asked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know. "The kind that would see his potential as either a weapon to be claimed or a threat to be eliminated," Ophis replied. "Training him increases his survival chances." "And your investment," Rias added pointedly. "Yes," Ophis didn't deny it. "I do not make investments lightly. His success benefits us both." The honesty was somehow more reassuring than any protestation of altruism would have been. At least Ophis wasn't pretending her interest was purely benevolent. "What kind of training?" Kaniko spoke up for the first time, her voice carefully neutral despite the fear still evident in her golden eyes. Ophis glanced at the small Nekomata with something approaching approval. "Power control. Combat techniques, understanding of supernatural politics and threats, the skills necessary for survival in our world." "I could provide the same training," Rias offered, though she didn't sound entirely convinced. "The Gremory family has resources, connections, protection, but not infinite power," Ophis stated matter-of-factly, "nor the perspective of one who has observed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Your training would prepare him to be a competent devil. Mine will prepare him for anything." The warehouse fell silent except for the whistle of wind through the broken doors. Issei could feel the weight of multiple gazes on him, waiting for his decision. Rias offered safety, structure, a place in the established order. Ophis offered power, knowledge, and challenges he couldn't even imagine. But as he looked at the infinite dragon god, remembering the casual way she had saved his life and the genuine interest in her ancient eyes, the choice felt surprisingly easy. "I want to learn," he said quietly, "from both of you if possible." Rias' eyes widened in surprise while Ophis tilted her head curiously. "Both," Rias repeated. "You're right that I don't understand the supernatural world," Issei continued, gaining confidence as he spoke. "And she's right that I need to be stronger to survive it. Maybe I don't have to choose sides. Maybe I can learn what each of you has to teach." Diplomatic partner, though potentially dangerous, divided loyalties rarely end well. An interesting proposal, Ophis mused. Though it would require the Devil Princess to accept certain limitations on her influence. "What kind of limitations?" Rias asked warily. "He remains mine," Ophis stated simply. "You may provide supplementary training, political education, social integration, but his primary allegiance belongs to me." "That's hardly fair," Aquino interjected, speaking for the first time since their arrival. You're asking Butchu to invest time and resources in training someone she can't recruit. I am offering to share knowledge with someone who lacks the power to be a true threat, Ophis corrected. The arrangement benefits her as well. Proximity to my investment provides certain protections. Rias was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing the implications. Having the infinite dragon god's favor, even indirectly, would be politically valuable. But training someone she couldn't ultimately claim went against every instinct of devil nobility. And what does Issei-kun get out of this arrangement? She asked finally. Everything, Ophis replied simply. Power, knowledge, protection, purpose. The tools necessary to forge his own destiny rather than merely surviving it. The casual confidence in her voice sent another flutter through Issei's chest. She spoke about his potential future with the certainty of someone who had shaped the destinies of nations. There would be conditions, Rias said slowly. Oversight of his training, regular check-ins, assurance that his humanity isn't compromised. Acceptable, Ophis agreed, though you will find his humanity is more resilient than you expect. And I get a say in all this, right? Issei asked, though he was already fairly certain of his answer. Both supernatural powerhouses turned to look at him, and he felt the weight of their expectations. This decision would shape not just his immediate future, but potentially the rest of his life. I want to do this, he said firmly. I want to become strong enough to protect myself and the people I care about. If that means learning from both of you, then that's what I'll do. Ophis nodded once, seeming satisfied. Then we begin now. Now, Rias blinked in surprise. It's nearly midnight and we're in a destroyed warehouse. Optimal conditions for initial power assessment, Ophis interrupted. Unless you have other commitments. The challenge in her tone was subtle but unmistakable. Rias straightened, her competitive nature clearly engaged. Of course not, though my peerage will observe and learn, Ophis finished. Their reactions will provide useful data about his progress. As both supernatural beings began making preparations for whatever training was about to commence, Issei found himself wondering what exactly he'd gotten himself into. But as he caught Ophis glancing at him with what might have been approval, he decided he was looking forward to finding out. After all, how many people got the chance to be trained by both a devil princess and a dragon god? This is either going to be the best thing that ever happened to us, DxD observed, or it's going to get us killed in spectacular fashion. Watching Ophis casually reshape reality to create a training space while Rias coordinated with her peerage, Issei couldn't help but grin. Either way, he murmured, it's going to be interesting. The real question was whether he would survive long enough to appreciate just how interesting it was going to get. The training dimension Ophis created defied every law of physics Issei thought he understood. With casual gestures, she had folded space around the warehouse until they stood in what appeared to be a vast crystalline cavern that stretched beyond the horizon. Floating platforms of condensed energy provided elevated surfaces, while streams of liquid starlight cascaded from impossible heights. Time flows differently here, Ophis explained, her voice echoing strangely in the dimensional pocket. 1 hour of training equals approximately 10 minutes in your reality. Efficient. Rias and her peerage had been relocated to a safe observation platform that shimmered with protective barriers. From their elevated position, they could watch without risk of being caught in whatever Ophis had planned. This is incredible, Issei breathed, staring up at what might have been stars or might have been holes in reality itself. You created an entire dimension, modified existing space-time, Ophis corrected. Creating dimensions requires more energy than is practical for training purposes. More energy than is practical, DxD repeated in amazement. Partner, she just casually mentioned that creating entire dimensions is merely impractical, not impossible. What kind of being are we dealing with? The kind that makes gods nervous, Issei muttered, then flushed as he realized he'd spoken aloud. Something that might have been amusement flickered across Ophis's features. An accurate assessment. Now demonstrate your current capabilities. How? Instead of answering, Ophis raised her hand and shadows began coalescing around them. The dark energy took shape rapidly, forming into humanoid figures that radiated menace. But these weren't mere shadow puppets, each construct thrummed with genuine power, their eyes glowing with malevolent intelligence. Combat assessment, Ophis stated simply. Survive. The shadow constructs launched themselves at Issei with inhuman speed, forcing him to react on pure instinct. His enhanced reflexes kicked in, allowing him to dodge the first attacker's claws by mere inches. The boosted gear materialized on his left arm with a familiar flash of red light. Boost power flooded through his system, but it felt different than it had during his brief encounters over the past few days. The energy seemed to resonate with something deeper, something that hadn't been there before his transformation. "Partner, the power flow is different," DxD observed as Issei landed a solid punch on one of the shadow constructs, dispersing it into wisps of darkness. "There's something else mixed in with my strength, something infinite." "The bond," Issei gasped, rolling away from another attacker's strike. "She said she was sharing her power with me." Boost. The second power surge brought with it a flood of sensations that had nothing to do with draconic might. For just a moment, Issei felt his perception expand beyond human limitations. He could sense the flow of energy through the dimensional space, the pattern of the shadow construct's movements, even the faint emotional resonance coming from Ophis as she watched his performance. Curiosity, satisfaction, and something else, something warmer that made his enhanced heart skip a beat. "Focus," Ophis called out, her voice carrying clearly over the sounds of battle. "Your emotional state affects power distribution." Issei's moment of distraction nearly cost him as a shadow construct's claws raked across his shoulder, tearing through his school uniform and drawing blood. The pain was sharp but manageable. His enhanced physiology was already beginning to heal the minor wounds. Boost. The third enhancement brought clarity along with power. Issei could see the patterns now, the way the constructs moved and attacked. More importantly, he could feel the infinite energy that Ophis had shared with him, dormant but accessible if he could figure out how to channel it properly. "Try combining our powers," DxD suggested. "The dragon energy and whatever she's given you, they're not separate anymore. They're integrated." Issei ducked under a sweeping attack and placed his palm against the construct's chest. Instead of throwing a normal dragon shot, he reached for both sources of power simultaneously. The result was spectacular, a blast of energy that contained the focused might of the Welsh dragon enhanced by the fundamental force of infinity itself. The construct didn't just disperse, it was unmade, erased so completely that even its shadow disappeared. "Excellent," Ophis said, and Issei felt an absurd surge of pride at her approval. Again, more shadow constructs materialized, these ones larger and more aggressive than the first wave. But now Issei was beginning to understand how his enhanced abilities worked. Each boost from DxD amplified not just his base strength, but also his connection to Ophis's infinite power. By the fourth boost, he was moving with speed that left afterimages, striking with force that cracked the crystalline floor beneath his feet. Boost, the fifth enhancement brought something new, a brief flash of shared sensation that had nothing to do with combat. For just an instant, Issei felt what Ophis was feeling as she watched him fight, pride in his rapid adaptation. Satisfaction at seeing her investment pay off, and beneath it all, a growing warmth that seemed almost fond. The emotional connection was so unexpected that it broke his concentration completely. A shadow construct's fist connected with his solar plexus, launching him backward into one of the floating platforms with enough force to crack the energy construct. "Your focus wavered," Ophis observed, appearing beside him with that characteristic silent grace. "Why?" Issei struggled to his feet, acutely aware of her proximity. Up close, her otherworldly beauty was even more distracting, pale skin that seemed to glow with inner light, dark eyes that held depths he couldn't fathom, and an aura of power that made his enhanced senses sing with recognition. "I felt something," he said hesitantly, "like an echo of what you were feeling." Ophis tilted her head, genuine curiosity replacing her clinical assessment. "Elaborate." "Pride, satisfaction." "And something else, something," he trailed off, unsure how to describe the warm fondness he'd sensed without sounding presumptuous. "Interesting." Ophis placed her hand against his chest, directly over his heart, and Issei felt the now familiar surge of infinite power. But this time, there was something else in the energy transfer, a deliberate sharing of sensation that left him gasping. For a moment that felt like eternity, he experienced existence from her perspective. The vast loneliness of infinite power, the endless cycles of civilizations rising and falling, the crushing weight of being so far beyond other beings that connection seemed impossible. And then, threading through it all like a golden wire, the unprecedented fascination she felt when she looked at him. "The bond is deeper than anticipated," Ophis murmured, her hand still pressed against his chest. "Power sharing has created unexpected connections." "What kind of connections?" Issei asked, though part of him was afraid of the answer. Emotional resonance, shared sensation, the beginning stages of true symbiosis between finite and infinite consciousness. Her dark eyes met his, and for the first time since he'd met her, she seemed almost uncertain. This was not predicted. Partner DxD's voice was subdued, almost awed. What she's describing, it's not just power sharing. She's creating a permanent link between your souls. Is that bad? Issei asked, though he found that the thought of being permanently connected to Ophis was more thrilling than terrifying. Unknown, Ophis replied honestly. Such bonds have never been attempted between beings of our respective natures. The results could be transformative for both parties. Before Issei could ask what she meant by transformative, the observation platform erupted in panicked shouts. Rias was pointing at something beyond the dimensional barrier, her face pale with alarm. "Ophis," she called out, her voice tight with urgency. "We have a problem in the real world." The infinite dragon god's attention snapped to the observation platform immediately. With a casual gesture, she dissolved the training dimension around them, returning them all to the warehouse in an instant. But the warehouse was no longer the empty space they'd left. It was now surrounded by figures in dark robes, each one radiating supernatural power. Kokabiel, Rias breathed, recognizing the towering figure at the center of the group. But what's he doing here, and why now? The fallen angel in question was an imposing sight, 10 wings of midnight black spread behind him, and his eyes burned with the righteous fury of a being who had once stood beside God himself. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of one of the leaders of the Grigori. "Ophis," Kokabiel called out, his tone carefully respectful despite the obvious tension. "I come seeking answers, not conflict." "Speak," Ophis replied, her earlier uncertainty replaced by the cold authority Issei was becoming familiar with. "The power fluctuations from this location have been concerning. Reports suggest you have taken a personal interest in a human sacred gear user." Kokabiel's burning gaze shifted to Issei. "I would know why the infinite dragon god involves herself in such trivial matters." "My interests are not subject to your approval," Ophis replied, her voice carrying undertones that made the warehouse windows vibrate. "No, but they affect the balance between factions," Kokabiel countered. "If you are grooming a new champion, the other leaders have a right to know." "Champion?" Issei looked between the two powerful beings, feeling very much like a bone being fought over by supernatural wolves. "The Red Dragon Emperor enhanced by infinite power," Kokabiel continued, his eyes never leaving Issei's face. "Such a combination could tip the balance of power significantly. Some would see it as a threat requiring preemptive action." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Issei felt Ophis's power spike in response, the air around them growing heavy with barely restrained force. "None will touch what is mine," she said simply, but the words carried the weight of absolute certainty. "And what of his humanity?" Rias interjected, stepping forward despite the obvious danger. "You speak of him as a possession, but he's still a person with his own will." "His will brought him to me," Ophis replied without looking away from Kokabiel. "His choice to live, to grow stronger, to accept the consequences of power. I merely provide the means." "And the bond?" Kokabiel asked, his tone suggesting he knew more than he was saying. "Power sharing of this magnitude creates complications?" "Complications that are mine to manage," Ophis stated firmly, but Issei could sense the uncertainty beneath her confident exterior. Through their growing connection, he felt echoes of her confusion about the emotional resonance developing between them. She had expected a simple master-student relationship, but something deeper was emerging, something that surprised even the infinite dragon god. "Perhaps," Kokabiel said carefully, "but such bonds have historical precedent. The last time a dragon god formed a deep connection with a mortal being, the results were explosive." "What historical precedent?" Issei asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Kokabiel's burning eyes settled on him with something that might have been pity. "The Great War, boy. One of the factors that led to the near extinction of 3 pantheons was a dragon god who became emotionally compromised." The warehouse fell silent except for the sound of Issei's enhanced heartbeat thundering in his ears. Through their bond, he felt Ophis's reaction, a complex mixture of denial, recognition, and something that felt dangerously close to fear. "That will not happen again," she said quietly, but her voice lacked its usual absolute certainty. "Won't it?" Kokabiel pressed. "You've already begun sharing more than power with him. How long before emotional attachment compromises your judgment? How long before his mortality becomes a weakness your enemies can exploit?" Issei felt Ophis's emotional state through their connection, the growing turmoil as she grappled with questions she had never expected to face. And beneath it all, he sensed something that made his chest tighten with unexpected warmth, genuine care for his well-being that went beyond mere investment protection. The training continues, Ophis declared, though her voice held notes of uncertainty that hadn't been there before. Under controlled conditions, with appropriate safeguards. What kind of safeguards? Rias asked, her protective instincts clearly engaged. Emotional barriers, limitation of bond depth, measures to prevent the kind of attachment that leads to poor decision-making. Each word seemed to cost Ophis effort, as if she was fighting against her own nature. But through their connection, Issei could feel her true feelings. The thought of creating barriers between them felt wrong to her, like denying a fundamental part of what made their bond unique. She was struggling between her rational understanding of the dangers and an emotional pull she didn't fully comprehend. "No," Issei said quietly, surprising everyone present. "No," Kokabiel repeated, his eyebrows rising. "No barriers. No limitations." Issei stepped closer to Ophis, ignoring the dangerous levels of power radiating from the assembled supernatural beings. "If this bond is changing both of us, then let it. I'd rather face whatever comes honestly than live behind walls." Ophis stared at him for a long moment, and through their connection he felt the war raging within her. Infinite power and ancient wisdom warring against something newer, something vulnerable and precious that she was afraid to name. "The risks," she began, "are mine to take," Issei interrupted. "Just like the choice to live was mine to make. I'm not asking you to make yourself vulnerable for me. I'm asking you to let us find out what we're becoming together." "Partner," DxD's voice was soft with something approaching reverence. "I think you just did something that's never been done before. You just asked a dragon god to trust in the unknown." The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before Ophis nodded once, so slightly it was barely perceptible. "The bond remains unaltered," she announced, though her voice carried notes of something that might have been fear. "Whatever we become together." Kokabiel's expression darkened. "This is madness. When emotional attachment compromises your judgment, then we will deal with the consequences." Ophis cut him off. "But I will not diminish what we have begun out of fear of what it might become." As the fallen angel and his followers departed with obvious displeasure, Issei found himself alone with Ophis on the warehouse floor. Rias and her peerage had withdrawn to give them privacy, though he could sense their concerned observation from a distance. "You have committed us to an unknown path," Ophis said quietly, her dark eyes searching his face. "I've committed us to honesty," Issei replied. "Whatever this bond becomes, at least we'll face it without pretending it's something it's not." For the first time since he'd met her, Ophis smiled, a genuine expression of warmth that transformed her otherworldly beauty into something almost human. "An interesting perspective," she murmured, stepping close enough that he could feel the infinite power radiating from her skin. "Very well. Let us discover what we become when a finite human and an infinite dragon choose to grow together." As their hands touched and power flowed between them, no longer just hers flowing into him, but something truly shared, Issei realized that his choice to live had led him to something he'd never expected. The chance to teach a dragon god what it meant to hope for the future. The bond between them pulsed with possibility, infinite and finite combining into something entirely new. Whatever they were becoming, they would become it together. And there it is. Subscribe for more epic what-ifs and let me know what crossover you want next. Thanks for watching. Peace out.